Hello, my friends. So a lot of people have pointed out the glaring, obvious contradictions that have been coming out of the media and the government and the way that they have portrayed the recent protest, the January 6th protest in Washington, D.C. And, I could make a whole video getting into those contradictions. And they're so in your face, they're so just insane that I have to believe that this Orwell quote from 1984 applies perfectly to it.
Even the names of the Four Ministries, by which we are governed, exhibits a sort of impudence in their deliberate reversal of the facts. The Ministry of Peace concerns itself with war, the Ministry of Truth with lies, the Ministry of Love with torture, and the Ministry of Plenty with starvation. These contradictions are not accidental, nor do they result from ordinary hypocrisy. They are deliberate exercises in doublethink. For it is only by reconciling contradictions that power can be retained indefinitely. In no other way could the ancient cycle be broken. If human equality is to be forever averted, if the high, as we have called them, are to keep their places permanently, then the prevailing mental condition must be controlled insanity.
This is not just your ordinary everyday hypocrisy. These contradictions are thrown in our face so that the type of person that is able to swallow it is basically put into a state of controlled insanity, where their ability to understand things in a sane, consistent, rational way is just so overthrown by this level, by being force-fed this much contradictory information, that they're put into a state of controlled insanity, and that is the perfect state for people to be controlled overall. And I mean, the contradictions are everything from the fact that the Black Lives Matter and the other leftist progressive riots that occurred throughout the year of 2020 were characterized as being mostly peaceful. There's that famous image of I think it was CNN doing a broadcast from one of these many cities that was thrown into chaos by these riots, and the reporter's standing there where there's fires burning in the background, and the caption underneath reads, Black Lives Matter, mostly peaceful protest. So they get the pass, they get sympathy, they get characterized in a positive, sympathetic light, whilst causing just incalculable damage, burning down cities. In Seattle, they actually started burning down a federal building and stormed into a federal building. But now you have the leftists who cheered for that and supported that, calling it mostly peaceful and a very positive thar Now they look at what the Trump supporters did in Washington, D.C., which in just about every regard was far more tame, and they call them rioters, they call them a terrorist mob. I've even heard people, pundits, saying things like, oh, this is the worst terrorist attack since 9/11. I mean, it's being blown so far out of proportion that it's, this is definitely some kind of gaslighting campaign or some kind of attempt to create this Orwellian state of controlled insanity where the contradictions are so in your... I have to believe it's deliberate. Like, these people cannot be this insane. It's hard for me to really comprehend. So there's that. Then there's also one of my favorite contradictions, which is how these people in Congress, after the protests in D.C. occurred, they got up there and sanctimoniously whine about how blood has been spilled in their sacred temple. Literally using words like that. I mean, I am not exaggerating. Where you look at the speeches given by like Cory Booker, for example, and many others I was watching during the live broadcast of Congress after these protests. They literally talked as if they were high priests, saying that their sacred temple of democracy was defiled, despoiled, corrupted by blood being spilt within it. I guess blood can be spilled by them just about everywhere else in the world, but if any little drop of blood gets spilt within the Capitol building, then that's just crossing the line. I mean, that kind of hypocrisy is just, it would take hours and hours for me to enumerate all the different ways in which Congress and the federal government in general has caused death, destruction, chaos, and gallons, oceans of blood to be spilt. I mean, not only in their wars overseas, not only in the lockdowns that they recently imposed, the amount of heartache, the amount of destruction, the suicides that have come out of these kinds of things, but in also the federal government's, even in their immigration policies, even in just, I could go, the amount of things that the Congress has, that the federal government has done. I mean, it leaves me speechless that these people are going to pretend that they are the most pure and pious group in the world, and that a single person being killed within the Capitol building is somehow defiling or despoiling their sacred, their pristine, sacred, innocent existence. It's absurd. It's really, I am at a loss for words. But my favorite contradiction is how these demons, these creatures, are acting as though the protest was a threat to democracy. As if these kinds of people have ever cared about the will of the majority. Let me show you a clip that pretty much sums up the opinions of these kinds of highly educated people in the establishment.
And then also, I'm a sociologist, so this is maybe not a fair question for you, but you also kind of mentioned the referendum system as being one of the big reasons that you think that Switzerland's gone on a different path from other countries. And I wonder about the downside of referenda. For example, I mean, the kind of tyranny of the majority problem, and how rights... Which problem? The tyranny of the majority problem. So just the idea that human rights shouldn't be put up for vote because, like we saw with Proposition 8 in California and people voting against same-sex marriage there, even though the courts had legalized it. And then in Switzerland, women didn't have the right to vote until the 70s, which made them, I believe, the last industrialized, developed country because it was, had to be put up for a vote.
As you can see from that clip, this is what the average college degree holder, the average member of the establishment, whether they're a sociologist like this woman or a politician like the people in Congress, this is how they think. This is what they believe. This is what they have believed for centuries, going back to people like Julius Huxley, who I've mentioned before, in his book, New Bottles for New Wine. Huxley sums up the sentiment of this elite class by basically disparaging the common person's opinion, saying that they are, backwards, barbaric, brutish, and narrow-minded. The common person's beliefs and opinions have never been respected by this elite ruling class. And they have all of the social engineering that has been done over the past century in particular has been one long project to undermine and alter the opinions of the majority. And not just their opinions, but to literally undermine their demographics. When you look at America, they've been trying to replace the majority, which was for the entire existence of this country, going back to the beginning, white European. They've been gleefully proclaiming that they have succeeded just about in replacing this founding majority. So they don't care. They've never cared about what the majority thinks. Do you think in 1965, when they passed the Hart-Celler Act, that most Americans would have wanted for this immigration reform, for them to be flooded with non-white immigrants? Back in 1965, the vast majority of people were what the average person today would consider horribly racist. The average person in 1965 was extremely racist. They would never have wanted this. And that's just one example. The average person they never wanted these sorts of things. The direction that the progressive, leftist, Marxist establishment, funded by international banking you-know-who's, they've never wanted what their agenda is. And they've had to keep their agenda a secret. They've had to use social engineering. They've had to use cunning and deceit the entire time, and they're still deceitful about it. They're still not completely forthright about what they're doing and the direction they're taking society. And we're supposed to believe now that they are defenders of democracy? Like they're offended by some kind of threat to democracy? They are the threat to democracy. They've always been the threat to democracy. They've always been the threat to the majority opinions, the majority will in America and in Europe and in every other white country. Nobody ever wanted that. It's absurd. What more can I say? That to me is just the peak of absurdity. Them saying that they want to defend democracy. These people spit on the average person's opinion. Anyway, it's a bit of a rant. Probably a little less eloquent than I was hoping I'd be, but I think you get what I'm saying. Well, last thing I'll say is Bitcoin's booming. That's pretty good. Any of you guys who are Bitcoin billionaires and want to throw a shekel my way, I would greatly appreciate it. You guys have, I'm sure, life-changing wealth if you got into Bitcoin early. So congrats to everyone who holds Bitcoin. Even a tenth of a Bitcoin would be like life-changing wealth to me. So if any of you feel like being generous, got a link to my Bitcoin address in the description. And I've also got new sweaters. I just stopped at the thrift store and got a few new sweaters, a few new items that are going to go up on the eBay. So if you want to support the channel, check that out. I need to be making more videos. I've been quite distracted by being a father, which is really the greatest joy in my life right now is my daughter Alice. She's wonderful. I hope that all of you out there, young men, get on that kind of a thing. I just turned 29. My 20s are almost over, so I'm glad that I got to be a father before my 20s ended. So anyway, I hope you guys have a good new year. Hope 2021 is better than 2020. And hopefully I'll be back with more videos soon. Thank you for watching.